The floor of the combi was hard against the sand surface, and we were buried good and proper in the sand, and we were going to go nowhere. And that motor didn't have it running, it just gave up on us. However, as this scenario was unfolding, we realised we just had one remote chance of communicating with our travelling companions who were now about 2 kilometres ahead of us. They couldn't see us, there was dust everywhere. And somehow we needed to get their attention. They were 2 kilometres ahead of us, they couldn't see us, we had slowed down and stopped, and they were just powering ahead. What are we going to do? And so, as the combi ground to a halt, man, we were out those doors and blasting on those hooters, those two little bike hooters that we had each side of the vehicle. Paula was out there tooting hers and I was tooting mine like a couple of madmen, blasting, hooting and hoping, praying like hell that they would hear them. We just kept blasting those horns, blasting as we watched the dust slowly creep into the distance. It also appeared now that the dust areas that we were in and they were in were just getting thicker and thicker and thicker. And so eventually we just stopped hooting and we just standing there looking. In the quietness of the Sahara, all we could hear was the hum of their motor in the distance. And we just stood there straining our eyes. Did they hear us? Well, man, we just hooted and hooted and hooted and hooted. Did they hear us? So we're there straining our eyes looking to see if we could see any noticeable form of a vehicle heading towards us. But all we could see was the dust getting thicker and thicker and thicker, and their motor, the sound of their motor in the distance getting further and further away. And we're thinking, what the hell do we do now? We're bogged right down in the sand up to our axles. We're sitting on the sand floor and they're driving away in the distance. And all we can see is this dust everywhere. What the hell do we do now? Standing there looking in the distance, shaking our heads thinking, what are we going to do? When suddenly, this black shape bursts through the floating dust and we hear the awesome blast of an air horn. Military air horn. And we're just so stoked. And within a few minutes, they were no more than about 50 metres away from us. And oh man, how stoked we were to see them. Oh my goodness. But the big challenge was, now, are they also going to get bogged trying to get us out? Because they were fine when they were going, momentum was going their way, but now they were stopped in the soft sand like we were. Is this going to be a big problem for them too? They began to do a long, arcing, sweeping turn and eventually pull up in front of us, about 15 metres ahead of us. And they stopped, got out of their truck and proceeded to survey the situation and to connect up their 20 metre or so steel tow rope to the front of the combi. And of course the idea was to winch us out or to tow us out. They eventually took up the tension on the tow rope and proceeded to make the effort to slowly pull us forward. Well, of course, in the meantime we had been furiously digging the sand away from the rear wheels and had put the sand ladders under the front of the rear wheels and so forth, those sort of things we were doing, digging sand out and all that type of thing. And so we were ready, and as they began to slowly move forward, their truck started the typical sand-bogged behaviour by doing the bounce thing. When you bounce up and down, you're having difficulty with traction. You start to feel yourself digging in as you're moving forward, because this up and down bouncing thing starts to happen, and that gets very concerning. When the vehicle starts bouncing up and down, you know you're not making progress and you're digging yourself deeper in, and their truck was bouncing up and down. Well, this continued on for a couple of minutes, and it was clear that we were making no progress, and that now both vehicles were in danger of being severely bogged, which left us no choice but to abandon the tow in the way that we were currently doing it, and to try and come up with a better plan. I guess by now they were probably a bit jacked off that they had hooked up with us in the first place. Getting them bogged, oh my goodness. But of course the biggest issue was that the 8-ton truck only had front wheel drive. That was the biggest issue, of course. And if an 8-ton truck gets stuck in the sand with just front wheel drive, well, what the hell do you do then? I mean, you're in big trouble, aren't you? So the next strategy was to find all the loose tow ropes that we could muster up and try and move the truck a little bit further up the track, excuse me, to a more solid footing, to a less sandy area. And that was the idea. However, this obviously proved no easy task either, as the truck was clearly struggling, just moving forward the way that we were. It was struggling away there, bouncing away there. But eventually, after a few minutes, the truck eventually bounces its way forward to about 35 metres up in front of the combi, which was about the maximum length of the loose tow ropes that we could find. And so we hook up again. Unfortunately, the track, even at that point, 35 metres further up, was still no firmer at that point. It was still as sandy as it was in the beginning. And we figured, oh no, we're just going to end up with the same problem again. They're going to get bogged again, and we just have this scenario all over again. Oh dear. But this seemed to be our only option. So we hooked up those loose steel tow ropes once again and proceeded to try and make a successful tow. Unfortunately, the complete opposite happened, with both them and us now buried up to our axles in the sand. Oh my goodness. We tried very unsuccessfully, I might add, for the next half hour or so to free ourselves, but just found ourselves, both vehicles, just deeper in the, starts with S, sand. Oh my goodness. We were just thinking, what do we do now? What the hell are we going to do now? Both vehicles bogged up to their axles, the combi being totally underpowered. You know, you try and get a little bit of grunt going in the engine and we just conk out. It was just die under the strain. It just, they couldn't hack the pace. Combi motor was way too underpowered. Now I can see why 70 horsepower 4-wheel drive vehicle would have been the way to go. But that just wasn't the case, and so we had to come up with an answer. Not just for our vehicle, but for the 8-ton truck as well, of course, which had the power, but it just didn't have the traction, because it was trying to pull itself forward instead of pushing itself forward. And believe me, there's a massive difference between pushing 8 tons and pulling 8 tons. There's a massive difference in traction and weight distribution whether you're pushing or pulling. But once they got up and running, they were okay. That 8-ton momentum would propel them forward. But getting up and running, that was the big problem, the big issue, and it was proving to be a major headache to us. Well, an hour passed and we were just making no headway at all. We were digging massive piles of sand away, but the vehicles, they just kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper. The more we dug, the deeper they got, both vehicles. Well, when it eventually got to the point that actually tempers snapped, would you believe? Unfortunately, tempers snapped. And I remember this particularly well because when I took my movie camera up to the top of the sand dune and began to take a movie of what was happening to have a memorable record, I was severely chastened by one of the truck crew who was a bit jacked off with me, appearing so casual when this was a major dilemma and I need to be pulling my weight, according to him, and you haven't got time to be going up there taking movies. He was quite jacked off with me, man. He really got annoyed with me. needless to say, we all became good friends further down the track, so that was good. And this was just one of those moments. Anyway, I may well not have bothered getting the movie because I ended up losing it anyway a few years later. In the last 40, 50 years, I lost it somewhere, so such is life. I'd still love to have it, of course, but I'll just have to make do with the photos that I've got, unfortunately. And I've got a few photos. However, our predicament was really starting to stress everybody now, as you can imagine, because we still had more than 1,000 kilometres of the central desert ahead of us. And we know there was at least, it would appear that there would be more than at least 100 kilometres of sand dunes directly in front of us, directly in our path. And if our progress is going to be this slow, fuel and water is going to run out long before we reach the other end of the Sahara. Man, with they're revving away and using fuel and going slow, using so much water, man, we're going to run out way earlier than anticipated. This sort of predicament obviously consumes serious amounts of fuel. And as a truck only had limited amount of fuel like us, limited amount of fuel for both vehicles, we really couldn't depend on one another in that way. So it was pretty touch and go in regard to the fuel stakes for a start. Well, and eventually in pure frustration we all decided that it was now lunchtime, and as it was getting near the hottest part of the day, let's just have a bit of a break here. Make some shade and enjoy a little bit of downtime and thinking time or discussion time, and try and relax a little bit. Everything we'd done the last couple of hours had only made things worse, so we needed to just have a break. Let's just have a little bit of downtime for a minute, just relax for a little bit. We were just sitting around when we decided to let's pull out a map to see if it were possible to find some other way to get around this problem. Maybe there was another less used track perhaps. Maybe it was possible to find our own track on a more solid surface. So we're looking at the map there, trying to figure all this out. However, the maps were as ignorant as we were, with very minimal information on them, and the terrain was just regarded as variable. So that didn't help us much. But what did seem to have the potential to help us was a little slice of information tucked in the corner of the map, which read, "Tips on desert travel." Oh, I thought, well, that should be interesting to read, to see what they have to say. And so I began to read, and of course the usual tips that you would imagine you would see, like plenty of water and beware of dust storms, keep warm at night, all that sort of things. However, being amateurs in the predicament that we now found ourselves in, any sort of information was going to be beneficial, I thought. So I just kept reading and reading and reading until I saw a footnote that gave me a little bit of a glimmer of hope. Something that I had never considered or thought about. And the asterisk footnote said, if you find yourself struggling in the desert sand, reduce your tyre pressures to 12 pounds per square inch tyre pressure. And it will significantly improve your mobility in the sand. It's interesting. Hey, I yelled out. It says here to reduce the tyre pressures from 35 psi down to 12 pounds per square inch for improved mobility. Why don't we try that? Everyone looked at one another, and before you could say Jack Robinson, that we were all down on our knees, dropping those tyre pressures down to 12 pounds per square inch, including the truck. The truck people were just like us, just volunteers, inexperienced, not hardened expedition staff. They were just volunteers and novices like we were, so this was new to them as well. Well, eventually everything is ready to fire up again. We drop the tyre pressures and I hop in the car, hop in the combi, and everyone's standing in a circle around the van looking somewhat apprehensive as we're about to try out this new idea of dropping the tyre pressures.